What movie or series or book lit your fuse and made you have to tell stories on the page and on screen?
Yeah, what a great question. And probably is going to have a fairly humbling answer for me, because actually the thing that really wanted me to be in the world of entertainment, which is really all I want to do, being a writer is obviously part of that. But I was not one of those kids who at the age of 7 had 5-page novels in composition books, in my drawer. I never conceived of being a writer. What I wanted to do was to do that entertainment transaction. And that really started when I was about 8 years old with the Beatles. I just loved the Beatles, not only for the music, but the joy, the energy, the promise of a future, the promise of something that belonged to us rather than the previous generation. And because in Britain, it was a difficult thing. Britain's experience in World War II was so titanic that there was a sort of 20-year hangover after World War II, where we were told as kids that history had already happened. All the good stuff was in the past. And it was kind of difficult to argue with that, because obviously a world war is a gigantic thing, and to have been victorious was huge. But of course, it was really depressing. I was born 9 years after the end of World War II, and my first memories are probably 12 years after it. And I was coming up to the age of sort of 7, 8, 9, feeling kind of depressed. It was all over. It was all in the past. There was nothing for us, nothing ahead. And the Beatles totally changed that for me. It proved, yes, there was something for us. And on top of that, I was suffering from that thing that I have heard about from numerous performers of various kinds, actors, comedians in particular, I think, who were looking for the love and approval they did not get as individual kids from their parents or families. And of course, the Beatles were just the perfect antidote to that. The hysteria amongst the audience. I thought, this is what I want. I want to do something that gives people joy and happiness, but also gives me, therefore, back the love and approval from an audience. So that was set in my head, really from about the age of 8 or 9. And I didn't know how to do it or what to do, but I knew that's what I wanted. I wanted to be in that world with an audience. How it happened, I didn't care. But I started out in the theater, then I went to television, then I went to writing books, but the proposition was always the same. Do something that will make somebody else happy and give me back some of the reflected glow.
And so I wondered, because what I remember about the Beatles when I was a kid is that technically, precision-wise, they were brilliant musicians to the point where they couldn't hear their instruments, but it was so drilled into them that they were flawless. But, they made those movies like Hard Day's Night and, and Yellow Submarine. And I just thought that it somehow, I don't know, disarmed them and made them accessible. And so they weren't just these guys on a mountaintop. They were just kind of these goofy Brits that you kind of loved. I don't know if you were a fan of their movies.
I was a fan of everything. The movies, the publications, the little fan magazines. I loved it all. And, you got to remember back then that they were making it up as they went along.
Right.
They had the example of Elvis, who had been a big pop star and then got into movies. And they kind of thought that was possibly the way to do it. They were inventing superstardom in a way that hadn't been around before. So the movies were lovely. I loved Hard Day's Night. I loved Help. But it was a bit of a blind alley for them. They thought that was the inevitable next step, and it wasn't. It was really just a parallel step. But the other thing that I remain really super interested in is the 1960s. We say that, But actually, really, it was so regional. It was, the 60s happened at different times in different places. And really, the 60s overall didn't really happen until the 1970s. And that's the humbling part of my answer, because I try to remain open to everything, every new thing. I try and keep up with it. I try and learn from it. But the honest answer is my fundamental influences are from that classic decade, from your mid-teens to your mid-20s, which for me were the 1970s. And in particular, I felt movies during the 70s were so distinctive.
Yeah.
They, you know, let's say you start out with MASH, the movie, which I believe was late 1970. That's a brave movie. It's a bold movie. Could not get made today because of parts of the content and so on. And then, of course, the classics. We had The Godfather, The Deer Hunter, which to me taught me a lesson, which was that, of course, those were movies with action, incident, suspense, life and death stakes, all kinds of things going on in a classic thriller manner, but they were patient. The running time was long, the scenes were played out as long as they needed to be. There was no rush. I mean, actually, both those movies, Godfather and Deer Hunter, start with wedding scenes that are expansive, patient. I get the feeling that these days you would have to do those scenes in about, like 130 seconds, because of the way things are edited now, and the rush of you got to have new. It's something that I guess social media has inculcated amongst us, that we need sensations coming thick and fast, one after the other, very brief duration. But those movies from the 70s, they played out as long as the scene needed to be. And I became fascinated by that, the duality of it. Yes, suspense, action, waiting for the next thing, but doing it in a manner that was relaxed. And so that was a lesson that I really carried forward. I wanted to do both those things, a really urgent plot, but a sensation of patience.
Because Reacher is really, he's that lone guy. He's that Clint Eastwood guy. He's that, was there sort of a North Star or a template for that maybe came from the movies about who this guy was going to be? I mean, look, he owns a toothbrush. When he's done with his shirt, he throws it out and gets another shirt. I mean, they're very, very specific rules for Reacher, and I just wonder, were there those sort of the strong silent types, the Charles Bronsons, who sort of were in your mind as you started writing that character?
For sure. I mean, by that point, I knew enough about the entertainment business to know that you cannot draw up a laundry list of specifications that you need. Mm-hmm. I think that's totally fatal. If you were to sit there and think, well, I need this and I need this, and of course I want women readers and I want young male readers, and if you do it that way, it's dead. It's dead on arrival. So you've just really got to trust your instincts. So that's what I did. I just metaphorically closed my eyes and typed. And Reacher is what came out. And then, of course, the question is, okay, yeah, but where? Where did he come from? And you're right, it goes back to that ancient character, the noble loner, the mysterious stranger who shows up in a place of danger and solves the problem and then moves out. That's an essential part of the myth as well. And I guess, to be honest, I got that from The Lone Ranger on TV, which was a real touchstone for me, because looking back on it, everybody in the world remembers the Lone Ranger. Nobody in the world remembers one specific storyline. It's always the character. The character is the appeal. And that wandering hero has been around not for just hundreds of years, but really thousands of years. And so it's something that the human soul deeply craves. We want that. We want help. We want uncomplicated help. Everybody's got a problem. I mean, maybe trivial, maybe really serious, but wouldn't it be great if some strong, silent person showed up at your door, solved the problem, and then moved on so that you don't have like gratitude issues afterward? That's a huge part of the myth. And so, yeah, there's so much of that. Plus, specifically, I loved the David versus Goliath story. I had a picture book telling that story when I was a little kid. I loved the story, but I was a huge Goliath fan. I liked Goliath better. And I was always annoyed that Goliath didn't win. And I would keep reading this book, somehow hoping he would win one time. But he never did. So when I came to writing Reacher, not only did I want that noble loner, but I wanted the huge guy, the guy that you could count on to win. And it was a bit of an experiment. Can you make suspense that way? If it's pretty obvious Reacher is going to win every physical contest, probably every mental contest too, does that give you opportunity for suspense? So it was experimental in that area, not being an underdog, being the overdog. Can the overdog be the good guy? Is there suspense in that story?
Yeah, and but the one part of that myth that I always thought was great was the fact that that big guy doesn't ask for anything.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. It's a kind of almost a noblesse oblige. It's almost a sort of Marxism, from he who has to he who needs. And you don't expect to get praise for it or reward for it. To quote a bad guy from the movies in A Few Good Men, the Jack Nicholson character says, "I don't want money, I don't want medals." That is what those people want. They just want to do the right thing and they don't want a reward for it.
Maybe it was a work of yours that was successful or approval from someone who mattered to you. He first gave you the confidence that you could create scenes in a book, and then later on that could work in a movie and that could work in a television series. And I hope you'll indulge us and work in the fact that it sounds like a lot of your motivation came from being laid off.
Yeah, that really was what it was. It was, and I don't think that anybody should ever say they're confident that they can do it. My observation amongst people in various arts, writing definitely, TV for sure, if you think you can do it, you'll probably fail, because you can't be that self-assured. It's always taking a risk. It's always taking a chance. Even when you have a long run of successful books like I did, 20 plus books, I should have been theoretically complacent about it. I should have said, yeah, I can do this. But every new book is the same old struggle. And you should never be overconfident. If you don't feel that this one is awful, the worst thing you've ever done, you're in a panic about it. If you're not feeling that, then the book is going to not work. Somehow you need that insecurity to perform. So, and I think another point that I learned is that you're writing a book. If you've got half an eye on the eventual screenplay, be it for the big screen or the small, then it's going to be a bad book and a bad screenplay. You've just got to do the book, and then it becomes somebody else's problem to turn it into the screenplay, which again is something I'm really convinced about. You should never, ever adapt your own stuff, because you need a certain kind of brutality or callousness to rip it apart and put it back together again. It's almost impossible to do that with your own stuff, because when you've written the book, obviously every word is genius, otherwise why would it be there? So how can you get rid of any of it? It's very difficult to do your own stuff. So I think the best thing for me was to write the book, and then somebody else has the problem of turning it into film or television. And from what I've seen, they do a great job of it.
I wondered, and I read that at Granada you worked on things like Prime Suspect, which was one of my favorite miniseries ever. And then you had this thing where it all kind of went away. So an extension to my question, there must have been some moment where you sat down and you wrote this, you showed it to someone, and that person whose opinion mattered to you said, "This is good."
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I lost my job, as you said, and I was really annoyed about it. And so the anger and revenge aspects in the Reacher books stem directly from that. That was me getting my own back. And I remember in the first book, there's a line that said, "I tried it their way, now I'm going to try it my way." And that was the crucial feeling for me. And I wrote that first chapter of the first book in pencil on a legal pad. And at that point, and it was a short chapter, only a few pages, I gave it to my wife, Jane, and said, "Do you think it's worth continuing?" And she is not a natural thriller reader. She prefers other types of literature. So I felt this is going to be the acid test. Is she going to say yes or no? And she said, "Yeah, I like this. Keep going." And then when I finished it, I sent it to my brother Andrew, who is the most like me, the person in the world most like me, and also a big, huge thriller reader, read everything. So his opinion was going to be coming from a different direction, far more informed. So I sent it to him, and he said, "Yeah, this is really good." So at that point, I thought, yeah, I've got enough confidence. But since then, I really don't like showing stuff to anybody. It's for the reader. It's for the people out there. The opinion of other people prior to that doesn't really matter to me. I want to know, what does the reader think? Is the reader getting joy and pleasure out of this for a couple of days during their hard life? That's all I want to know. I don't care about reviews. I don't care about awards. It's about the reader closing that book and thinking, "Damn, that was good." That's all I need.
What would you say was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome to allow you to turn these things that influenced you into your own language as a writer?
I was very aware of needing a kind of key or a way in. I needed to find a crack in the door that would let me in. And in the end, I found inspiration in two other movies, actually. One, again, from the 70s, Days of Heaven. And I'll explain why in a minute. And the other one was Dances with Wolves, which was a much later, what was that, 1990?
Yeah, 90.
That was just a few years before I started writing. But in that Dances with Wolves, the Kevin Costner voiceover parts, I heard a smart guy, a resourceful guy, but a silent man who is not accustomed to speaking. There was a kind of halting delivery to his voiceover that sounded a little bit inarticulate, but it wasn't really inarticulate because he was not a dumb guy. He was just used to being alone. And similarly, in Days of Heaven, there is that voiceover by the young girl that is used to bridge certain parts. Again, a very inarticulate sounding, but hypnotically poetic type of voiceover that again comes from a person not accustomed to narrating things. And so I thought, that is my key. Reacher is this alienated loner. He can go literally days without saying a word to another human being. Therefore, talking is not what he's good at, not what he's used to. So it enabled me to find that kind of halting delivery that concentrated on short sentences or even sentence fragments like a person would be thinking. And that was the key for me. It defined the style, it defined the approach. That's what let me into the story, certainly what let me into the character. And I found that to be absolutely it was like the magic key to the lock. As soon as I figured that out, then it was great, off we go.
When you entrusted the movie rights the first time, so we have Tom Cruise, and I know there was an outcry from your fans who say, what are you doing here? Tom Cruise is, he's shorter than I am. Your guy is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think Tom is a terrific actor and he sells it. But what, looking back, made that decision okay and the right one at the time?
Well, for me, it was, I probably underestimated how negative that reaction would be. Because in my mind, as the author of the book, it was very clear to me that the book is the book, and any adaptation of it for a movie or TV or whatever was a parallel version. It was not sequential. It wasn't the book first, then the movie somehow replacing the book. It was a parallel comment, a parallel opinion on the book. So I underestimated the passion with which people would object to Tom Cruise on the physical level. So what I was faced with was a decision at the time, ignorant of the upcoming fallout. I thought, Tom is just a great actor. He is internationally probably the last of the great old-fashioned movie stars. And for a book writer, I've got to admit it, you've got half your mind on the promotional side of it for the books. And so here was the world's biggest movie star, and they were going to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars around the world promoting my brand. And so I thought, that's a great deal. And I did enjoy the movies. The first movie in particular I thought was terrific. But it did lack that physical component. Reacher walks into a room, the temperature drops a little bit, everybody's a little scared for a moment. And the physical side did not come through in that sense. So the movie was kind of missing something. But of course, for people that came fresh to the movie who hadn't read the book, the movie stands alone. And on its own terms, it's amazing, really good. And Tom was lovely to work with, very, very interesting guy, very nice man. And so, I have no bad memories of that at all. But the chance to change the actor was irresistible in a sense. But also, really, the main thing was the running time. A movie has maybe 90 minutes of content from my standpoint, whereas a streaming season as currently configured, you've got 8 hours, sometimes 10 hours, sometimes 12 hours to tell the story. That's just irresistible.
Yeah, that's true. And also irresistible is when you get your Goliath, huh?
Yeah, because inside baseball, the financing is different. With a feature film, really the actor is the person that attracts the investment. And it's different in streaming television. The platform provides the investment, and you've got a completely free hand, essentially, as to who you cast. And we were very aware of that. And but it was a bizarre casting process because it was done during COVID, where we couldn't all get together in a room like you normally do. It was all done on Zoom, which I felt weird about at first, but then I suddenly twigged. I thought, no, wait a minute. This is all that the viewer will ever see, this guy on the screen. So this is how we must judge. And I went nuts about it. I said, I'm going to judge on the first 1 second, because that's what I wanted. I wanted somebody capable of stepping on the screen, and without saying anything or doing anything, he had to just own that screen and be that guy. And I knew instantly that, literally within that first second, that Alan Ritchson was the guy. And I was anticipating a kind of ridiculous argument with all the other producers. They're going to be saying to me, what, you're basing this on 1 second? But actually, everybody had the same opinion. We were all looking for that same thing, the instant, impregnable dominance that the character must have.
Well, what is it that he did to make such a substantial first impression?
I felt that he was giving out a vibe of being 3 or 4 moves ahead, which is exactly what Reacher needs, because that's who Reacher is. He knows what's going to happen in the next second and the next, and he's a little unsure of what's going to happen in the third second. And I needed somebody who could just be that. And Alan seemed to be able to do it. And then later, when I got to know him, when, we were on set and hanging out, I found out that he had been, as a kid and a young adult, he had been a chess champion. I mean, a seriously good chess player. And I thought, yeah, that's it. Life is chess. And he is seeing 3 or 4 moves ahead. That's what chess players do. And he was bringing that to the screen, which I thought, so many little seconds in the Amazon show, Reacher is just waiting for everybody else to catch up. And Alan does that so perfectly. That doesn't show off about it. It's not boastful. He is just patiently waiting for everybody else to see what he already saw.
Yeah, and then he'll hear their wrong assessments and deliver the accurate one.
Exactly. He'll explain it to them, yeah.
Yeah, and which makes him kind of that perfect hero, because it's easy to marginalize him because he's built like a middle linebacker, but at the same time, he's smart like a middle linebacker too.
Yeah, he is. Because the other huge influence on me, I guess, as a kid was Sherlock Holmes. The books and all the various movies and TV, of which there must be hundreds by now. And in fact, a Spanish journalist developed a nickname for Reacher, which I thought was really smart, making jokes in a foreign language. He calls Reacher Sherlock Homeless, which is perfect for that character.